Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Dynamics Corner, the podcast where we dive deep into all things Microsoft Dynamics. Whether you're a seasoned expert or just starting your journey into the world of Dynamics 365, this is your place to gain insights, learn new tricks, and make development fun again. I'm your co-host, Kris.
And this is Brad. This episode was recorded on July 9th, 2024. Kris. The heat is on, and so are we. This episode was exciting because it goes back to my roots with development, and we learned some neat tips and tricks.
New tools.
Yes, and even new thoughts. Ways to approach implementations to think, not with how things were, but how things can be. And I learned some cool development tricks, and now I want to make a game in Business Central. With us today, we had the opportunity to speak with Patrick Schiefer of Cosmo Consult. Patrick, how are you doing?
I'm fine, and you?
Good. Welcome back. Been looking forward to talk with you again. It's been a short time, but after having such great information last time, been looking forward to talking to you this time about another important topic that you talk about, that I saw that you spoke about at Tech Days, which was an interesting topic. But before we get into the conversation, could you tell everyone a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, of course. I'm Patrick Schiefer. I'm from Austria, working for Cosmo Consult. I'm actually MVP for 2 months now. Was a goal for me for the last couple of 2 years, I guess. And yeah.
Congratulations on that, by the way. It's a big accomplishment.
Yeah, congrats.
And on Easy Tech Days, as you already mentioned, I talked a little bit about some stuff I'm working on. I talked basically about nothing is impossible in PC, which means that, in my opinion, you don't have any technical restrictions in Business Central when you just know how to cope with your problems. So,
anything is possible in Business Central.
Cope with your problems.
In my opinion, everything is possible. At my workshop, I've done a workshop and a session. Actually, I found one problem which I didn't find a solution, or which I didn't find a nice solution. I find a dirty solution for it. But for most problems, you will find a solution in Business Central, and it's just about knowing how you can work around some things, because we got this universal code thing, and we got the migration to cloud and so on, and we have many restrictions when we think about cloud.
Oh, yes, there is. Well, I mean, there are some challenges that you'd mentioned when you're working in the cloud environment that I know I encounter quite often, around file management, around sometime information or interface exchanges or the like as well, which can make things difficult. But to go back to your point, I've always said that too, that I don't think there's any problem, other than, life and in a lot of cases, medical needs. But there isn't anything that you can't solve if you have the, proper amount of time and the proper amount of money. Usually you can fix most problems or find solutions for most problems.
Time and money.
With if you spend a little time or a lot of time and a lot of money on it too. So, no, it's an interesting conversation, and I'd like to talk with you about, some of the Business Central design patterns that you talk about, as far as you had mentioned, being able to solve problems or come across solutions within Business Central, understanding, how to code and understanding how it works. So,
yeah. So basically, I've showed some different design patterns for solving problems. So my main problem, which I was talking about, was accessing local hardware, because still in SaaS we have still many situations where we have to access local hardware. So we at Cosmo Consult, for example, have one customer which has a smart card secured system, and we need to access this smart card from Business Central, and the customer is fully in SaaS, so we needed to find a solution. And what we've did is that we used the Azure Relay service from Microsoft, which is a quite cool technology. It's just a technology which is in between Business Central and some local service. And you will connect from Business Central to this Azure Relay. And then you will have a local service. We use C# for our service, but you can use any programming language you want. And then we connect from local service also to this Azure Relay. And via this Azure Relay, you can synchronously talk to your local hardware. And it's very easy. And you already mentioned costs at the beginning. It's also very cheap to use it. So it costs, I think it's about €9 a month to use this Azure service. And I guess in most of the Business Central projects, €9 a month, or about $9 for the American audience. I guess $9 are quite nothing inside of a Business Central project, because projects are huge and you pay a lot of money for licensing and so on.
Well, I've seen some solutions that cost quite a bit more than €9 a month if you lay it all out. But you hit on one of the big struggles that I've also encountered with Business Central, and that is in the old Cal days or the non-online environments, you had access to the local system, whether it be the file shares, whether it be the printers, whether it be any other type of hardware device. And that's one of the big struggles that a lot of implementations are having now, even with printing. With the ability to, automatically print. I know you can do PDFs and stuff with the service to do it, and even file transfers. And you had mentioned using Azure Relay, which is a great service, but that is something important to think about, is no longer thinking about the constraints of Business Central, to start to realize now that there's other services in the technology stack that we have access to solve the problem. It's strange, because if you've been working with Business Central or Navision or Nav, you're accustomed to solving a problem a certain way. And this forces us to think differently, but to use different tools to solve the problems. So that is a great solution. So in that case, you had created a service, but there are also other services available that somebody could communicate with to interact with this Azure Relay service and the local system.
For the Azure Relay service itself, there is an open source tool from Microsoft, which is in the PC Tech Samples. It's a GitHub repository, and you can use it out of the box. There's already some examples, or even for file system and so on, something like that. And you can use it out of the box and change just the local service to fit your needs, and everything works fine. So for our first project we have done with the Azure Relay, we used this open source tool. Now we wrote our own, because our projects are getting bigger and we have more things we want to access. So we wrote our own service. But basically, you can use this open source service. It will work for most of the scenarios. And as you already said, when you work for Navision or Business Central for years, you often just think about Business Central, and many developers forget about that we are living in a huge ecosystem from Microsoft, where we can use many services. I also talked about Power Automate, for example, in my session at PC Tech Days, because Power Automate has a lot of connectors for file systems, so you can also use Power Automate to access your local file system, even without using of any Azure resource or something like that. You can really work with your plain local file system. You don't just have to install the, how's it called, on-prem data gateway from Microsoft, and then you can use the local file system. And I'm working on a proof of concept at the moment, because I didn't try it out now, but I'm working on a proof of concept where Power Automate is reading a local file system and sending data via the PC connector to Business Central, so you can handle file interfaces without even writing one line of code. And that's, in my opinion, is very amazing, because Business Central is getting very simple. You don't have any additional code for your file system and so on. And you don't have to deal with upgrades, because in SaaS we get these upgrades every 6 months and so on, and we don't have to deal with any breaking changes, because the connector on Power Automate stays the same. So in my opinion, if it worked like I imagined, then it would be a very amazing solution to many problems.
I think that would be an amazing solution, because I know that I deal with a lot of individuals that have file transfers, and in trying to work with everyone to get their head around the technology is not the same, that you have to come up with different solutions, and to be able to use that different, like you said, the ecosystem to connect it together, and you don't have to write any code, is a definite saving.
We did have a conversation with someone with that. When you're designing a solution in Business Central, you really have to have at least an understanding of what other tool options you have out there, not just from an AL standpoint, right? So you got to learn a little bit more about Power Automate, what it can do to give you that same result, but in a different tool.
Yeah, and what I always talking about is the Business Central API. So Business Central API is very mighty. Even the standard API, if you don't use any custom APIs, you can do very much things. And you can write any external service which is accessing Business Central. And because the versioning of the API, you don't have any breaking changes anyway. So there are so many ways how you can achieve something in Business Central.
You say the word breaking changes, and I have to admit I cringe every time I hear that, because that's over the past several years I hear breaking change, and it just, for some reason, it triggers me. So to hear that you can eliminate or reduce the amount of breaking changes is it's something nice to hear. And it's I think a lot of individuals do discount the APIs within Business Central and the ability to interface to other services to be able to interact with Business Central. It is powerful, and they do quite a bit more. And as you had mentioned, with the different versions, you can ensure that whomever is you're dealing with the contract for the service, you don't have any issues as these updates come out or these changes come out, that it's going to work the same for you, and then you can work through the changes. So when talking about the Business Central design patterns and some of these legacy interfaces, and thinking differently and implementing Business Central online versus Microsoft Dynamics Nav on-prem or Business Central on-prem, what are some of the other points or challenges that you've had for interfacing information with Business Central? I really like the Azure Relay, by the way. I have to investigate that a little further.
Yeah, the Azure Relay is a very huge solution where you can achieve almost everything. But it has one disadvantage. It costs €9 per listener, which means every computer where you want to access hardware, you have to install this service, and every service costs €9. And you also have to cope a little bit with connection and so on. And one very common use case, at least in Austria, what we have is we have cache drawers, for example, which are connected to the local machine and not to any server or something like that. And you really have to access the hardware of your local machine, which is connected maybe to the web client, but not to your server or something like that. Or even you're maybe just connected with a SaaS environment via the internet, and maybe you don't have any server anymore, you just have your client. And of course, when you think about cash drawers and point of sales, you also may have more than one point of sale in your stores. So you have to deal with these different connections. What I do for that is that I use a JavaScript add-in because Business Central has the possibility to execute native JavaScript code inside of the web client. And the advantage of JavaScript is that it's fully executed on the client side. So you can do whatever you want on the client side. And again, what I have done is that I've wrote a C# service as small again. Writing a C# web API is a very easy job. You can start with web APIs within minutes. And you have set up a simple API just by one PowerShell command. And it starts up Visual Studio Code and you have your API running. And then from the JavaScript, I just access this web API, which is running on the local host. And because the web client and the C# service are both running on the same machine, I can just access it via localhost and can so access really my local client hardware and can do whatever I want on the local machine. I guess I can do everything which I have done back in the days in Navision with it. There's only one problem with it. You need an active page for it because web service add-in, web client add-ins are only supported in pages because it's JavaScript code and you need some kind of UI. But using this solution, you have also the possibility to access your local client hardware, and you have the advantage it doesn't cost anything. You don't need any additional service in Azure or something like that. And when you just use localhost, you don't have to think about much about security because you don't exposing any port or something like that to the internet, or you don't have a connection to the internet anyway from your service. Your service is just available via the local machine. So it's quite secure. Of course, there are always some ways how to hack something, but it's quite secure compared to other solutions.
Well, there is always a security concern. I don't, it's you can always take the safest route. If somebody's, in your house sitting at your computer, there's only so much you can do at some points. It's doing the best you can to minimize it. So what you had mentioned here, another option is you could write JavaScript in Business Central pages that can interact with the local hardware or local service on the computer to perform a function. Not many may know that you can create JavaScript or execute JavaScript within a page. How does one do that? Do you do some sort of control add-in? Do you have to load something special for that, or how do you do that?
So basically, I have an example here.
That is amazing. So you created a control add-in. The control add-in has JavaScript for the startup and for the scripting. And then you have a method, procedure, function. I hear everybody call them different names these days. But you have a procedure, a callback procedure that you can execute within code, which then has the URL to your local servers, which you created. And then you can communicate and send messages back and forth where they must have had an API, as you had mentioned, to open the cache drawer. So even that local API is not something you would have to write if you had another, in this case, if you had a company that managed the hardware for the cache drawer or for another device for that POS system. I'm assuming it's a POS system with a cache drawer. You could just communicate with their service. See, Kris, see how easy that is? 10 lines of code,
Sure.
done. But this is the type of solution. These are the types of solutions that are important to think of when you have an online environment. So you get the advantages of the online system with the upgrades, staying current, but then also still what some would call the limitation of interacting with your local hardware. You can solve that through a number of means, as we're talking about. One, you could use JavaScript. Two, you could use Azure services. And what else could we use? There always has to be a number three.
Yeah, of course. The number three for hardware, or let's say it's hardware, is to just have an API on the client side and call it directly via Business Central. Didn't mention this method at first because it's it's kind of SaaS ready, but it's better for on-prem, and we don't want to use on-prem anymore. That's why I didn't mention it as the first option. It's the easiest option from these three options, because you only have to write your AL code and you only have to write your C# code, and you don't need an additional Azure service. You don't need JavaScript knowledge or something like that. But therefore, the Business Central server needs access to your API, and if you're on-prem, that might not be a problem. You also can use localhost or something like that. But if you're in SaaS, you might expose a port to the internet. So you open up something from your local network to the internet, and when you do that, you have to think about security very much. You have to think about authentication and authorization and so on. Of course, you can include OAuth in C#, but it makes your solution more complicated. That's why it's not the preferred solution for me when you are in SaaS. But if you're on premise, it's the easiest solution and the easiest solution. But what we actually do is that, at least for our products, we use both versions, and we implement an AL interface where we can switch between these solutions. So we have both ways implemented, even in the same C# service. So we have one C# service which is allowing us to use the Azure Relay and the API, and inside of Business Central we can switch these implementations. So it's also easy to switch between on-premise and SaaS if you're migrating.
Yeah, I like that design. So you have an interface that can accommodate both solutions, so you can architect the solution appropriately, whether it be an on-premise solution or an online solution, which allows you the opportunity, as you had mentioned, to always consider the security considerations or additional checks that you need to put in place to ensure that the system that you put together is both secure and sound, which is good. Do you have any other tips and tricks for us here? This is like, I'm excited now. I've learned some great things today.
Yeah, talked also about file system. Of course, you can use these three options which I showed you, which I talked about, for connecting to the file system also. But for the file system, there are already some other solutions which are better. So you have some built-in possibilities in Business Central. You have, for example, the blobs inside of the database. But I, in my personal opinion, would not use blobs inside of the database, because it will blow up your database somewhere when you store files inside there. But there are also other options, like we have a OneDrive integration, we have Azure Blob Storage integration, and we have an Azure File Share integration. And the Azure File Share is the one which we are using the most, because it acts like a normal local drive in Windows. So if you have a file service or you have a legacy system which is writing files somewhere, you can use the Azure File Share, connect it to your Windows computer, and it acts like a normal local drive, and the legacy system will not even recognize that it is now writing to Azure. It just writes the files. And then from the AL perspective, it's also very easy. There's this new Azure Files Service client, which was introduced, I guess, in BC23, or maybe it was also BC24. I'm not sure in which version it was introduced.
I have that same problem. My mind is a blur. I forget they come out with so many features at each year that I forget, or each wave, or sometimes even in the middle of the wave. I guess it's part of the wave still, but I forget where it came from.
Yeah, I think it was actually an open source contribution that someone edited. And now we have the possibility to read and write files to Azure File Services directly from Business Central. And we can use it like we've done the Code Unit 419 earlier. We can use now the Azure File Service client and do whatever we want with files. And even we just get out streams of it, so we can use this stream for XML ports, Excel buffer, XML buffer, and so on for every table and every system we used earlier in Nav. We now can use this Azure File Service client, and of course you have to change a little bit of your code, but it's not that much. So the upgrade from local files to Azure File Services, it's not very complicated. And yeah, every time we talk about Azure, someone will say that what's the cost for Azure? And
I was just about to ask you that.
and Azure File Service is a very cheap solution. It costs a few euros a month when you stay under 10 gigabytes or something like that. So it's very cheap. And as long as you don't store massive data on there, you will not have any cost problems with Azure File Services.
See, Kris, these are all great solutions to think of. And again, some of these monthly charges, I listen and I hear the same conversations about cost. It's important to be conscientious of the cost if you have a subscription. It is difficult sometimes to calculate what that cost would be, but I've also been in cases where someone will not want to spend, go back to the reference of €9 per month for a solution, for a subscription, but they'll spend €3,000 to write a solution that's complicated. That's, so it costs more, in the long term, it's cheaper to use some of these services because you can get to use them quicker and they stay within the technology stack and you don't have to also repay to upgrade it in a sense. I mean, you may have to change some of your code as technology changes. I'm not saying it's across, but some of the solutions I've come across. So it's important to keep those. With the Azure File Service, you had mentioned that the JavaScript, you needed a UI page. With the Azure File Service, I know a lot of implementations have, imports and exports where they have to deal with files, whether it's, bank type files that they have to get with FTP and they can't use the API methods. With the Azure File Services, can you use those with scheduled jobs, like with a job scheduler to pull and import them so that you're not required to use a UI or a user?
Yeah. It's a normal code unit. You can use it from everywhere. So you can also use it in job queues and so on. But I personally try to force people to not use job queue for file services. I rather go for any trigger-based system, like I've mentioned already, Power Automate at the beginning. So in my opinion, it's always better to have a trigger-based solution which is reacting on changes in files and not polling from time to time. But it's just as you like. I don't think there are any performance problems when you use job queues or something like that. So you have to do very much job queues, I guess, to get a performance problem. But yeah, it's just a personal opinion to have it more trigger-based.
I like the triggers as well. Yeah. And so it's nice to know that you can work with those because that way you're not checking, you're waiting in a sense. Somebody's telling you something's happening instead of you having to check to see if it's happened all the time.
As you've already mentioned, you have customers which are needing FTP or something like that. Power Automate also have the triggers for FTP, so you can directly connect to an FTP server and work with that. So basically, Power Automate is a very powerful tool when talking about files.
Yeah, it's very flexible.
Yeah, Kris is going to be the Power Automate person here.
There's so many, just hearing from different people with different use cases of Power Automate, it's impressive.
It's almost like a separate application. Wait, it is.
I really like the approach of keeping code outside of Business Central or even having no code anyway, because then you don't have any problems with upgrades.
Yes. And that it allows the customers to take advantage of the application. And also some of the, I think you can create a better solution if you can put together the pieces properly. And you have less problems. I think so. You have an easier implementation in a sense. The customer is more satisfied because it's not typically a long and costly solution. And you don't have to tell them, oh, you can't upgrade, or they don't get those notifications that you can't upgrade, or they have broken processes when they do go through an upgrade. So it is nice to be able to use the existing pieces and put it all together. That's what I look at it now as is, when we first started out, you used to have to create and develop a lot to get things to work within Navision, right? Or Microsoft Dynamics Nav. And as time's progressed, we've been able to now more and more just take pieces and plug them in and put them together, almost like you have a laptop. You plug it into the wall to get electricity. You have something else, you plug it in, and everything kind of works and communicates together. Kris, you like that analogy there?
Yeah, it's very good.
Okay. Do you have any other quick Business Central design pattern legacy interface tips for us? I'm writing all these down. I'm going to go practice with all of these. I'm going to make a game in Business Central with JavaScript. That's my goal now, like tic-tac-toe or something. I did see someone had Tetris the other day. I was reading something. I forget which post or who I saw with that, but now I want to put a game, like one of the games from the 70s, like Space Invader, or 80s, like Space Invaders or something.
Yeah, like break time from BC, or you're on your break, you play games.
Yeah, you can play a game. Then make it so you can hide it. So if somebody comes by, they see your screen, you're back on BC.
Easter egg.
Yes, there you go. We have to do that. That's a mission of mine now. And I'll have to credit Patrick for telling me about that.
So basically, that one were the solutions which I showed on BC Tech Days. So I don't have anything prepared now anymore.
Okay. I'm always looking for more. Always looking for more. What have you done anything with printers? Local printers? That's a big
actually the
challenge.
Most use case at Cosmo Consult. We even put this together in an app source model. So we have put it on the app source using the Azure Relay. So we have our own solution with printers on app source using the Azure Relay, and now they are also working, the colleagues, on making it possible without Azure Relay for on-premise systems. So we use this technology for printing.
That is it. It is. It's one of the challenges I come across weekly. Is not necessarily printing like a user's printing, but they want to print things to specific printers automatically. Years ago when you had the default printer, or even if you wanted to schedule printouts. I don't understand why people print stuff still these days, but it's one of those.
Still one of our most problems. Even when you have warehouses or something like that, you want to print out that warehouse document on the printer which you are working on. And even when you think about the universal print, which is Microsoft advertising and implementing in Business Central, it's nice, it works, but you pay per print job.
Oh yeah.
And when you think about warehouses, you have maybe thousands of print jobs, but they are all just one page. So you don't pay per page, you pay per print job, and you will have problems with costs. So it gets very expensive if you have a lot of print jobs.
That is one of the things, universal print, and anytime you mention it, that's what it always comes up to, is the cost, like you had mentioned, because it quickly, it's unfortunate because it is a great tool, I guess you could say, to allow you to print directly from Business Central, but it really is just cost prohibitive to anybody that would use it with any volume. If you have to print one document a month, maybe it'd be okay, but like you said, if you start working with warehouses where they may have to print out warehouse documents, shipping documents, packing documents, it can get costly rather quickly. But that is still the number one use case I see, is printing. And I think, Kris, how many times do we hear that every time? Okay, I need to print to this printer that's sitting right next to me automatically.
Yep.
Exactly. You post something and you want to have your printed your posted warehouse document printed out in front of you.
Yeah, so that's good. So it's nice to know that you have a solution. I know there's a number of solutions available that are for that, and they all have their different options. But it's nice to know that you have one at Cosmo Consult as well.
One funny and easy solution which a colleague of mine had. They switched over to a non-paper warehouse, and the warehouse people just had problems because they don't want to go to the screen every time and refresh and check if there is a new warehouse document, a new pick order or something like that. And so a colleague of mine just go to, I don't know if it's also known in America, but he go to IKEA. It's a furniture shop, and he bought a lamp with Wi-Fi, which can change the color. And this lamp already has included an API. And what he has done is he just called this API via the on-premise server, and even every time they have a new order now, the lamp starts to flickering in red. So it's a solution. It was about €10 for the lamp, and maybe an hour of implementing, and they have an easy to use solution now. How they see if something new is here to work on.
That is
Chris,
fun.
I call that genius.
Fun project.
That is genius because you had a problem and your colleague thought of practical ways, efficient ways. That's the key. You know, you don't need something fancy. You don't need something costly. Something so simple as a light that just signals that you have a document so that they can visually see it. See, I like that idea. All these fun things.
Fun projects,
Patrick,
man.
we're going to have to spend some time together. Patrick, you want to make a game with me in Business Central?
Of course, every time.
We'll have to make a game together. And we'll put it out there. We'll make a game. We'll make something up, something fun, like trying to match documents or something. I don't know. Well, Patrick, thank you again for taking the time to speak with us. We do appreciate you taking the time. Time truly is the currency of life. Once you spend it, you can't get it back. So anyone who spends time speaking with us, we're greatly appreciative of. If anyone would like to learn more about some of the sessions that you present or some of the other tips and tricks that you told us today about connecting with legacy interfaces through Business Central, what is the best way to get in contact with you?
Best way to get in contact with me is via Twitter or X or LinkedIn. Or I'm also blogging about everything I show, and you also find all my solutions which I have on my sessions and so on GitHub. So if you go to GitHub/Patrick Schiefer, you will find all my solutions which I've done in the last couple of years. Or you just go to my blog, patrickschiefer.com. You will also find some of the solutions.
I'm definitely going to check out your GitHub listing also, and we're going to put the links to your Twitter and X. Will it ever be called X?
Sorry?
Will it ever be called X, or just be Twitter for everybody forever?
Yeah.
It's
Maybe
going to be Twitter
generation.
if you've been there before. Yeah, next generation, you're right. Maybe they'll call it X.
But they hear Twitter enough. They may, I don't know. Twitter. Maybe he's trying to go the way of Microsoft and changing the name every year just to throw everybody off. But again, thank you, Patrick. We'll put links to your LinkedIn and Twitter profile in the show notes. We look forward to talking with you soon.
Thank you for inviting me.
Right.
Have a great day.
Great. All right. Thank you. Ciao, ciao.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kris, for your time for another episode of In the Dynamics Corner Chair. And thank you to our guests for participating.
Thank you, Brad, for your time. It is a wonderful episode of Dynamics Corner Chair. I would also like to thank our guests for joining us. Thank you for all of our listeners tuning in as well. You can find Brad at developerlife.com. That is developerlife.com. And you can interact with them via Twitter, DVLPRLIFE. You can also find me at matalino.io, MATALINO.io. And my Twitter handle is Matalino16. And you can see those links down below in the show notes. Again, thank you, everyone. Thank you, and take care.